Did you ever consider that we do the impossible basically all the time in recording? I was reminded of this because a song I was recording for somebody in like a couple weeks ago, whenever it was, who cares? It starts off with the guitar player singer. He's playing very incredibly gentle acoustic guitar finger style, and singing. He's singing very kind of breathy and very soft. We had drums set up in a separate room, and he's playing like brushes and stuff. So that all kind of like makes sense together, of course. But we came back a couple weeks later or so and added a saxophone to it. And this guy that's playing the saxophone, he's not like trying to kill it, but he's blowing, he's going pretty hard. And that's impossible, actually. Before sound reinforcement, before recording technology, you couldn't do that. You couldn't have this guy with a super quiet guitar and a breathy voice and the drum kit, which is played quietly and with brushes, be difficult enough to pair those things anyway. But then a saxophone blasting in the background. If you put that guy playing that sax the way he was playing that sax next to this guitar player singing, you wouldn't hear the guitar and the vocals at all. You would just hear sax and you'd be getting killed by it, right? If you brought that to a live setting where you didn't have any sound reinforcement, the sax player would just be way too loud. And if you tried to move the sax player further and further away from the audience, what would happen is by the time the sax player was far enough away from the guitar player so that the audience would be able to hear the vocals and the guitar and the saxophone the way you wanted them heard, the sax player could not possibly play along because he would be too far away from that quiet acoustic and vocal to hear it. So it's just kind of physically impossible. Now, you could do it if you wanted to have the sax player playing nice and quiet, like subtle enough to fit so that the sax player didn't have to be 3 kilometers away from the guitar player. But that would make it a different song. That would make a different experience, right? That would be soft sax instead of like kind of a blowing like a hard sax in the background. Of course, we heaped reverb on it because that's how this works. It would be a completely different user experience, right? So you could have that formulation of instruments, but you could not have them played all like that together. That is a thing that you couldn't do before technology. You couldn't have the experience of a song with a super gentle guitar and vocal and a blasting sax. That is not a thing that ever existed before technology. There's kind of a lot of things like that. Honestly, you see it a lot more with horns, right? Because you hear blasting horns in songs all the time, kind of. You probably don't even think about it or register it, where it would be impossible to do that live. You would have to play the horn differently. So we do impossible things. We make songs that you never would have heard, or at least songs made in ways that would have been physically impossible before the modern era. And it's kind of fun to think about that sometimes. Don't get me started on kick drums. That's different.